Barkley Hendricks' work is often credited as an important precursor to identity-based work by a younger generation of artists. Since the 1960s, he has explored issues of race, gender, and identity through bold, life-size portraits, primarily of African Americans. He elevates images of his neighbors, family, friends, and acquaintances into an empowered, iconic status by emphasizing their unique style, attitude, and individuality. His paintings are cool, empowering, and sometimes confrontational. From 2008 to 2010, Hendricks was the subject of a large-scale traveling survey exhibition organized by the Nasher Museum of Art, which traveled to the Studio Museum in Harlem, Santa Monica Museum of Art, Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and Contemporary Arts Museum, Houston. His work has also been included in group shows at the Whitney Museum of American Art, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, National Portrait Gallery, MoMA PS1, and Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles. Please join me in welcoming Barkley Hendricks.
Good evening. Give yourself a round of applause for coming out. So given the schedules that many of you lead, I know that your time is valuable and I appreciate you being here. I'm going to tailor my introduction to the time-based situation because I can get chatty if it's necessary. However, this is a visual institution, so I will keep it visual. There will be some added tidbits that would relate to what you see, but I'm going to keep the chit-chat to the visuals and hold it as I was instructed to have a bit of the talking and questions afterwards. So I hope that works with what you do. I'm going to apply you with visuals. However, this particular first piece is a little deceptive. It's a very small piece. It's not the scale at all, and that's one of the things that happens when you have situations like this. The works don't necessarily work in terms of being projected. As I say, this is about a 11-inch piece, and it's called My Black Nun. Got its title because as a kid I used to pass a Catholic school, and later on I start wondering, I never saw any black nuns. So I decided to paint my own. Now this is a deceptive one that's a bit larger. It's almost that size. It's a piece that I learned a great deal from because it's oil and acrylic. And it sat on the easel for almost a year or more. The model was posing for me, and she took a break and sat down, and I turned around and said, wow, let me do a piece of her. And I grabbed the two canvases, put them together, and did the drawing. The Coke machine was a part of my old studio, which was Alcoholics Anonymous. So when they split, they left the Coke machine. So when I split, I took the Coke machine. And anyway, the piece sat there for a while, and I didn't know where I was going to go with it. At the time, my old girlfriend, who was a dancer, had flooded my studio full of balloons. And I had to go to Philadelphia, and I came back, and there were all these balloons there, and eureka. So the balloons got added in, and the piece was complete. Now, the other significant part of the piece is that I was introduced to using acrylic paint. The area around top and bottom, oil. And when I put the paint down, it took ages to dry. And a friend of mine told me, say, why don't you use acrylic? So I tried acrylic, and I've been using acrylic ever since. This is another piece that's deceptive. It's almost the same size. It's called Basir. He's a good friend from Philadelphia who came up to New London where my studio was, and it's all oil. And I had him change the pose for each view. This is a 72 by 48. She was walking down the street, New London, and she had the T-shirt on, and I said, "Hey, Mama, what plantation you from?" And we got to be friends, and I asked her to pose for me, and she did. Call Angie. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I did it. Say, interesting question, but it brought up other issues that I would have to get involved with. So, this is a 48 by 48 piece called Big Chuck. Chuck was one of the young men around New London that I got to be friends with. He used to sashay about with a T-shirt on that said, every time I think about it, I start laughing. Said, "Nihilism forever." And so I got him to pose for me on 2 occasions. It's called Blood. I think this is 78 for those who are sticklers for dates. Anyway, Donald Foamy was a former student of mine, and I got into pose. And say there are several stories I could tell, but as I said, I was going to not be chatty. I have to be chatty about this one. It's called Brilliantly Endowed. It's not what you think now. If you're thinking about anything. Anyway, self-portrait, which I've done several. The title came about because of a friend of mine who made a comment about, how does Hilton know that you're brilliantly endowed? Hilton, for those who go back a while, was Hilton Kramer, who was the critic for the New York Times. He wrote that Barkley Hendricks was a brilliantly endowed painter. So that's how the title came about. Dr. Cool. This is part of my limited palette piece. You'll see, just saw one that was kind of red on red, white on white, black on black. He was walking down the street one day, and I grabbed him quick, said, "Would you let me do a shot?" So he said, "Certainly." This is acrylic. As I said before, I moved from oil to acrylic. And this is Magna, which is a synthetic medium that not supposed to yellow, but everything yellows. We even yellow. Family jewels. This particular piece is, well, Jules is about 6'8", and I knew him as a student at Yale, and asked him to come up and pose for me. And it's not the best photo in the world. As I say, it's now in the collection of the Tate Modern in London. This is another deceptive piece. I don't really like images where the heads are large. This is a very small piece. It's about, 11 inches. And she was a dancer, good friend of mine, who posed for several pieces. It's called Frog, because she used to jump around a lot. This is another image of Jules. They were coming down the street in Philadelphia, and they looked like such a happy couple. So I asked could they pose for me, and they said yeah. So I named it after the shirt. Hasty Tasty. This is another one that the scale is a bit deceptive. This is at the permanent collection at the Studio Museum, and it's called Lordy Mama. And the title comes from verses by Nina Simone, and this is actually my cousin Kathy. It's always been mistaken for Angela Davis or who else was it? Kathleen Cleaver, because of the hair. But this is also a very significant piece because it was the first piece that I ever did with gold leaf, and the gold leaf kicked my ass. If you ever worked from gold leaf before, you know what I'm talking about. It was a valuable lesson. This is a former student named Mary. Actually, Mary, but I call her Mary because my folks were from the South, and they would pronounce Mary, Mary. And Mary had such beautiful eyes till it was, well, like those husky eyes. Michael BBP. The piece wasn't this large, and I think it was 1971, as you can see there, and one of three pieces that I did of Michael Black Panther Party. As I was walking down the street in Philly, I met him, and I asked could I do a shot of him. So the brother went into a half dozen poses, and when we got done, we had stopped all the traffic, and everybody started applauding us. So again, a deceptive scale. This is 48 by 48, and I think this is in 71. It's called Miss Brown to You, and the title is dedicated to Billie Holiday because she had a song called Miss Brown to You, and Miss Brown was or Suzanne Brown. She may be from Chicago, but she was a fellow student at Yale. Miss T, former girlfriend in Philly, and one of the things I wanted to do with the area of black, which is the figure, was to give the illusion of form without a lot of detail. One of the paintings that's here in the collection by Moroni, if you ever look closely at it, you'll see there's a very subtle area of definition and light that is a part of the black. And when I thought about it, I say, well, if I eliminated any area of definition and try to pull off the illusion of dimension by having the belt change as it look as though it's moving around the waist, and it worked. Again, the use of black to give the illusion of form. It's called Estelle. This is another deceptive piece. The head is actually about, again, half the size, and actually more than half in terms. It was rather small. And this is the second painting I did of Michael. It's called North Philly Nigga. I realize there are some of you that have problems with the N-word, but it's significant given what he said. I don't call people that. If it's used, say I'm an artist. He said, we went to school together, and when I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts for art for 4 years, he went to Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia for 5. While he was there, he was involved in the art, and when I ran into him and asked him to pose, he said he would, and he came up, and we were talking, and he was saying when he was in prison, we niggas from North Philly had to stick together because there was clicking sessions where if you weren't from the right neighborhoods, you were invited to get an ass kicking. Plain and simple. October's Gone Good Night. This is dedicated to a letter that I was getting, letters I was getting when I was teaching at the Connecticut College. I taught there for 39 years, and when I first started, I used to get letters from this student, and it was always anonymous, and she ended with the title, or it's not a title, I call it October's Gone Good Night. These are beautiful poetic letters which I treasure from someone I didn't know, and she helped me find out who she was, and I had her to pose for me. She was married at the time, and when she told her husband that she was posing for an artist, he came up to sort of see what's going on. And I told him, say, I'm interested in painting, not messing around. And the brother never came back. So, and I finished the piece. This is also, again, a limited palette piece. This is significant given it's almost the same size as this. This is one of the larger pieces. It's now at the National Gallery in Washington, and this is called Sir Charles, alias Willie Harris. People familiar with Willie Harris? Willie Harris was one of the characters in the play by Lorraine Hansberry. And as you know, Willie Harris was supposed to deliver some goods for Sidney Poitier. And Willie Harris didn't show up. He took the money and duffed with it. You know what duff is, the old duffel bag drag that you never sort of see him again. Anyway, Charles used to do a service for the Yaleys. He would say that he was going to do his run as far as picking up the herb, the spliff, Jamaica ganja, and so on. Well, Charles never showed up, and I used to get knocks on my door. He would say, "Hey man, you seen Charles?" I say, "No." It's called Sisters. Sophisticated lady. Another deceptive size. This is certainly half the size, and I decided to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say ornate, but patterned. The top area and the bottom came from patterns from my photographing a variety of different places. The area up here was from the tiles that I photographed when I went across North Africa and from Morocco. And that was from a rug pattern. What was very significant about this piece, we were having a very, very serious, heavy conversation, and it was almost brought to tears. And then all of a sudden she blew this bubble, changed the whole complexion of the conversation, and we almost cracked up. This is again my old girlfriend Adrian, who was a dancer. It started out with her completely nude on the couch, and I started to edit stuff, and the piece is almost that size, to be honest. Tequila. I met her one day as she was walking down the street, and nice outfit, so I decided to. If you can wipe out the stuff around it and just sort of focus on the circle, the piece isn't that large, but it's a part of my basketball series. The body of my work entails a number of images, and coming from Philadelphia, basketball was one of the major things that happened in our lives. And I say our lives, the males for the most part. There wasn't the areas of females involved until I moved to Connecticut, and the girls who are now part of the basketball hierarchy. what's going on. The piece is almost this size. And again, the area of limited palette. Adrian posed for this particular piece. How many people are familiar with fella Anipalapo Kuti? I'm seeing a lot of hands going up, which I should be very acquainted with fella. He's one of the most poignant musicians on the planet when he was here. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of dialogue about him, but anyway, I met him, and I was supposed to blow my horn with his band, but he died. And that's the piece. The shoes down the bottom represent the women in his band that were harassed and beaten up and raped by the police when they broke into his Nigerian compound. So I wanted to acknowledge them along with him. It's called Fella Amen, Amen. But that's not the heart. That's Africa flipped around, the continent, and the way that he described Africa, that it was backwards and upside down because of its political involvement with the rest of the planet. This is actually much smaller than this. It's called Full Moon. It was a baptism. There's no facial recognition because with, how can I say, the religious aspect, there's no identity. You're all the same. So that's why that works that way. Icon for Fifi. I met her in Abidjan, and she was bopping down the street in yellow, and I asked, could I photograph her? She said yes, and that was the piece that I did. The Last Almond Joy. That's an almond joy. I was giving out candy for Halloween, and I gotten down to the last almond joy and say, I'm consuming this one. It was dedicated to a friend. Again, deceptive. It's quite small. It's a piece that is inspired by my trips to Jamaica and my habits of picking up little goats. If you ever sort of pick up goats, they bleed all over the place. Well, this little goat didn't. It was the coolest little goat in the world. It just stayed just like that. So it's called Lunch with Picasso, or Curry Goat for Two. You know that goats are not pets. This is my wife, Susan. Petite kumquat. I'd never had a kumquat before, and I had a friend from Florida give me kumquats, and so I had Susan pose with that. And it was quite a job, because she had to pose in high heels with her eyes closed. But she carried it off beautifully. The experience I had in Jamaica with this particular image, I'm going to forego the dialogue about it. This particular piece is in Chicago now. It's owned by one of the preeminent artists, Nick Cave. Selena Starr. It's a young woman who was bopping down the street one day, and she just so innocent, and she posed for me, and I had to have her radiate something. She was just so beautiful. She now has, I think, 3 kids. The how can I say, Niles and Bob in Cuba. Niles was one of the models that I had when I was at my drawing and painting class, and the piece started to do things that reminded me of some of the photographs that you see concerning some of the fading and deteriorating paints in Cuba. So I called it Niles and Bob in Cuba. They were a happy-looking couple that was around the neighborhood from me. What was it? Gothic, Granite Street Gothic. This is for all the young folks out there and some old folks too. What can I tell you? Say don't want to dish y'all either. This is inspired by my Jamaican friends who party hardy. Let's put it that way. As you can see, her name. She was inspired by a friend who had wonderful blue eyes. I met him in Jamaica, and 3 portraits from the yard. They relate to Jamaica, they call the yard. And oops, let me go back just for a moment so I can point out the 3 portraits. 1 portrait, 2 portraits, 3. give a woman the right pair of shoes and she can rule the world. I think that's a quote from Marilyn Monroe. And when I was going somewhere, my wife Susan at the airport called my attention to this woman who had these shoes on with Marilyn's image. And I asked, could I photograph them? And she said yes, so I did. And as I was telling someone here about, she asked what I do with the images, and I say that it goes into a file, and if I need them later, I can use them. And this is the perfect piece to work with it. This is not really the best image for her, but somehow I like it. It's kind of distorted in a way that makes me satisfied with it for the most part. There's almost a halo glow from about her head, but that's not what was really planned. The leaf is called variegation leaf, and there's aluminum leaf, and the bottom is a gold leaf. John Wayne, young man I met in Jamaica, and his name was John Wayne. I tell you, when he said it, I had to ask him again. He said, John Wayne. And he said that fast, John Wayne. So it's John Wayne, folks. Or John Wayne. Anthem. This was a challenge from my wife about, say you think you're so hard. You're so good at painting. Paint some sequence. And not the best photograph of it, but I think I did a good job of doing sequence. I had that T-shirt for years, and one day in Lower Manhattan, I turned around and there was this young man with it on, and I asked, could I do a photograph of him? And he said, yes. So that's what inspired the piece. And this afternoon I saw a painting upstairs that had this colorful language on it. So I know that I could show my stuff tonight and wouldn't get any kind of problems with it. If so, take it up with the museum. This is a study piece for another work. "12 inches by 12 inches canvas." It was in my most recent exhibition in New York. That was a study piece. The photograph doesn't deliver enough information because around the canvas here is the 50 states stenciled on, and it represents the states where black men have been shot. And I have a cousin in Texas, and we were talking one day, and I asked him to send me a couple Confederate flags. Right there is the bullseye, or the sight from a laser rifle. That was a Black Christ image. The piece is almost that size, to be honest. Do I have to say anything? Had a brief conversation earlier, and it's called Roscoe. The painting is about this size, and it's called Photo Bloke. The young man that I met when I was in London, and I saw this brother coming down the street with this pink suit on, and I said, "I gotta get a shot of him." So he was photographing people out there, and so was I. So, Photo Bloke. Now I'll flip too fast. This is, again, is a deceptive scale. It's actually about like that, and it's from the mountaintops in Jamaica, and I finished it just before the storm came over. This again is a smaller piece, which is about like that. I like painting in the quarries in Jamaica. They're called moral holes by the Jamaicans. And I guess some of people sort of may think I'm nuts because instead of out there painting palm trees and stuff, I'm down in the quarry doing geometric shapes that I find very deceptive because I'm about 1,500 feet above sea level, and at times you don't know where there's a horizon line is. But I like the geometry of what these pieces introduce to me. This piece is about like that. And this is called With My Back to the Bulldozer. Because the only time that I could paint would be on holidays. And we're in Jamaica around Christmas time, New Year's, Boxing Day. You know, people know about Boxing Day. And the bulldozer isn't working, and I just happened to sort of put my works on top of the bulldozer and paint. So I love the compositions and the time that I was working, there was a young man who was taking a shortcut through the quarry, and he stopped and looked at me and said, "The clouds don't stop, do they?" I say, "No, they don't wait on you." This is an interesting piece in terms of working on it. I was almost done, and it was just enough time for the clouds to open up and give me just a little bit of blue sky. And it's one of those pieces where I had to work fast. And it's one of the things besides the color sort of situation. I think doing the landscapes have made me a better colorist. Now, I like the color of my other works, but one has to work fast to get that. Two selfies. A wall of SX70s. this is my old girlfriend Adrian, who's a choreographer, and she was working on the piece. And if you ever been around a choreographer, you will hear the piece over and over and over again. And there's certain things that go off in my mind that I don't want to hear it again. But because she had good taste, so we stayed friends for a long time. And just for reference sake, this is a painting of a good friend of mine who's no longer here, Charles Searles. I took my 2¼ by 2¼ camera to Virginia and photographed a lot of things around my grandparents, and came back and did the development and printing. This is called Up in Grandma's Room, and I also took it to Paris, and this was a piece called After the Rain. I've dealt with some images that weren't representational, and this is called Sidecar 1. And this figure here is of Miles Davis in his boxing crouch, I should say. And mixed media with graphite pencil, color pencil, watercolor. There again is the Miles Davis with his crouch. I mentioned this man this afternoon because I had lunch with a number of the notables in the museum, and I said after one selection had been made that I'll have what she's having. And then one of the other person beside me was having something that I said, I'll have what he's having. And that title came about because of Dexter Gordon. And the piece Dexter is almost his size. Anyway, I was in Boston at a club, and Dexter was playing. And Dexter was also in the movie Round About Midnight. And the title came about when Dexter got away from his handler and went into the club to have a drink, and he wasn't supposed to because he was alcoholic. And as soon as he walked in, there was a woman who was drinking, and next thing you know, her face went flat down on the table, and Dexter looked at her and said, I'll have what she's having. This is a piece you might have seen. In fact, I was told that, it's a part of, this is the head of a painting that's in a collection here in Chicago. The piece is about yay big. And the title is Shirt Off Her Back. And this area was a part of the shirt that I saw at a club, and the woman was on the way out, and I asked Could she turn around and I'd take a look at it? She turned around and whipped the shirt off her back and gave it to me. So it's called Sacrifice of the Watermelon Virgin, or Shirt Off Her Back. And that's all, folks. Now I'm supposed to ask you, are there any questions that I could...
I have two questions. One question is, most of your models look very lanky. Were they actually like that, or did you elongate them to make them look that?
I don't think they looked that particular lanky. No, I thought they were. Although that particular issue came up in terms of a dialogue I had with a woman some years ago, and she was a well-endowed woman, and I say I happen to like well-endowed women, and no, I don't try to sort of do thin ones. In fact, the painting near the end, which was called Anthem, was a well-endowed woman. And as I tell folks, I said, if there's any vestiges of love on the planet that I receive, came from well-endowed women, aunts, friends. So, no, it wasn't a situation where I was trying to do lanky, as you say.
The other part of the question is, I know you photograph for most of your paintings. Do you ever use the models live posing as well?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I just didn't go into... I did mention a number of it where people came up and posed for me.
My question may be influenced by the fact that maybe all the photographs weren't highlighting your work properly. But when do you make some of your facial features are very vague, and others are remarkably distinct? And do you start out with the conclusion that you're going to be distinct, or you're going to go more for an impression, or does that just come as you're painting?
Good question, and a valid one, because there were certain images where it wasn't necessary for a great deal of detail. For a full moon, like I say, I completely omitted any detail, and a couple where I was a bit faint, and some I was very explicit. So there's artistic license involved in how I decide I want to resolve a particular piece.
The question about your landscapes, they're all framed in gold frames. Is there a reason that you feel differently about those, that you treated them different?
Most of the images that you saw were either lunettes or ovals or circles. And when I put the canvases together or prepare them for travel to Jamaica, I usually use the embroidery hoops. And when I got what I want, I take them off. And the frames in question here are all manufactured in Canada from the sizes that I send there. But I like working with ovals, circles, lunettes. If you look at the world, it's not in squares or rectangles. And I feel that the shape of the particular landscape works for me that way. Plus, it's a compositional thing that happens too. Next.
It's not really a question, but I just wanted to add the woman in Miss Brown to you. She does live in Chicago, and her last name is Butler now.
Oh, all right. Do you know her? Tell her I showed her here. Yeah. See, now there's a classic case. Suzanne posed for me the whole time.
She told me the story of it.
Yeah.
Why do you make representation of
Why not? Oh, there's-
What made you make the switch from landscapes to monochrome portrait style paintings?
There's no switch there. Next. I can.